Okay. Welcome everyone to Sigmetrics 2020. My name is Edmund from Northeastern University, General Chair for Sigmetrics 2020. So this is the opening session of the conference. This is a live Zoom session, and I want to welcome everybody around the world. And this is going to be a roughly 2-hour live session that is going to have a lot of exciting parts. And this opens the online version of Sigmetrics 2020. I'm going to explain in a moment how the online conference came to be and some of the details. We're also going to have 2 very exciting talks by the Sigmetrics Achievement Award winner of this year and also the Rising Star Award this year. So let me now share my screen. So by the way, everybody joining, we're running on a Zoom webinar format. And that means there are certain panelists who you may be seeing across the screen. And those are going to be panelists who are going to speak during this session. And the audience, currently when you join, you actually cannot speak as a default. But if you have any questions about the session, any part of the session, please go to the Q&A box, the Q&A window of Zoom, and you can simply type in your questions for whichever part of the live session you're a part that is going on at that time. And then someone will actually pick up the question and depending on time limits, ask the presenter your question and then have it get the answer in the question and answered in live during the session. Great. So let me now share my screen and the slides. Okay, so hopefully you can see my slides. All right, so as I said, this is online conference of Sigmetrics 2020. Of course, this was not our original plan. Our original plan prior to COVID-19, which seems to be a long time ago, was to hold the conference in Boston, actually on the campus of Northeastern University. So this is in an alternative universe. We could have been enjoying the Boston summer and so on. But I think we're still very hopeful that we're going to have a very successful conference online. And in fact, even though COVID-19 is a great challenge to many people and it's been a tragedy in many ways, it also gives us an opportunity to actually hold the conference in a different way and possibly expand our community because, of course, registration is now free. And so anybody in the world who is interested in Sigmetrics can join on the session and also watch the videos that are associated with the papers. So the original conference was supposed to be June 8th to 12th. And so we kind of chose the timing of the online conference also at that time. So we're running the online conference from 9th to 12th. And so in April, the organization committee and the executive committee decided to cancel the meeting because of COVID-19 and move the conference online. And now, then we had a discussion about what kind of online conference we wanted to have. And in the end, we decided on a hybrid format where authors of accepted papers would prepare video presentations of their papers. Those presentations were then actually shepherded to make sure that they were of high quality. And now all the videos are available online on YouTube and also on ACM Digital Library. So the videos have all been shepherded. So many thanks to all the authors for preparing those videos and also for the shepherds for overseeing the process. And in a moment, the TPC chairs will explain the process. And also Zhenhua Liu, our publications chair, will also go into the process of it and also announce actually the Best Video Award. We have a Best Video Award. So currently the links to the videos and paper abstracts, as well as the paper abstracts, are already available on the Sigmetrics 2020 website. And so please go there. You'll find all the videos and the paper abstracts. So it's very easy to follow. Now, as I said, we wanted a hybrid format. The videos are very nice in the sense that you can look at them at any time and you can pause and fast forward or whatever you like to do. So it can reach a very broad audience because it will be on YouTube. At the same time, though, we also wanted to have a more participatory experience as a part of the online conference. And so we're having this live opening session today to enhance that experience. We'll have two very nice talks by the Achievement Award and the Rising Star Award winners. We also have, in addition to the live opening session, the Slack channels for discussion of papers, for socializing, and for career development. So those will be very nice venues for discussions, and we're going to keep the Slack channels alive for definitely the whole period of the conference until Friday, but also possibly beyond that. Now, finally, the authors, in addition to recording the videos, also have the option of presenting their work physically, hopefully, at IFIP Performance 2020 later in the year in November, or at ACM Sigmetrics 2021, which is going to take place in Beijing next year. And Longbo Huang, who's co-chair, general co-chair of Sigmetrics 2021, will be giving a preview of that later on. Now, even though this is going to be an online conference, we really encourage everyone to maximize your engagement, interaction, and participation in the online conference, particularly in this period, the next couple of days. Even though there's no physical conference going on, there is a lot of activity going on in the Slack channel discussions. Now, everybody's busy, so I think the best thing that everybody could do is to devote the next couple of days to this conference as you would in a physical conference. So to generate the kind of critical mass that we need for good discussions, right? So please go to the Slack channels and discuss the papers, socialize, interact, participate in the career discussions over the next couple of days. Now, I said also that the Slack channels will be active until at least 12 a.m. US Eastern Time on Saturday, June 13th, but possibly even beyond that. Because maybe there are going to be a lot of follow-up discussions, particularly with respect to careers. But most of the activity will still happen in the next couple of days. So please try to participate as much as you can in the next couple of days. This is going to drive the participation for the conference. A brief word about the workshops. There are two workshops which were actually held yesterday associated with this conference, MAMA 2020 and DCC 2020. So thanks to Anshul Gandhi, who interacted very nicely with these workshops. And the links to the videos and papers of the workshops are now already available at the following link. Basically, go to the website workshop page. And there are also two Slack channels associated with these two workshops. So if you have any questions or discussions you want to do for these workshops, please go to these Slack channels. Many thanks for, so even though we're doing an online conference, there was quite a job in moving the physical conference to the online conference. It really was a lot of work. And especially I want to thank the TPC co-chairs, Athina, Markopoulou, and YC Tay for doing such a great job on the technical program. Thanks to Zhenhua Liu, who did a great job in overseeing the publication process and making of the videos, the shepherding of the videos, the selection of the Best Video Award. Thank you, Zhenhua. Ningfang Mi actually did a lot of work in planning a lot of nice events for local arrangements in Boston, before the physical conference was canceled. So that was very unfortunate, but she is still doing great work for our online conference right now. So many thanks to Ning Fang. Thanks to Anshu, as I mentioned, for interacting with the workshops. Deborah Shah actually contacted a number of people for great tutorials. So we actually had tutorials lined up. Unfortunately, because of the move online, we decided not to hold tutorials this year and postpone them until next year. So we still have a lot of great tutorials to look forward to next year. Thanks, Deborah, for doing that. Many thanks to student activities chairs Stratis Unitas, Boji, and Carly Jo Wong. They prepared the careers channel on which there there's going to be discussion of, there are going to be company postings for positions, also academic positions and discussions of careers. Great activities are going to go on there. Also, thanks to Pritiz and Bo for actually obtaining 25K for student travel grants for Sigmetrics 2020. Now, of course, we're not having the physical conference, so that money has been deferred, has been transferred to Sigmetrics 2021. So it'll be very useful for us next year. So thank you, Pritiz and Bo. Jiaming and Xu did a great job in preparing the finances of the conference. Weina Wang has been publicizing the conference to many, many people. So actually I checked the latest registration numbers, actually 589 people actually registered for the conference. And so that's a very impressive number. I think that this is one of the advantages of the online format. It actually expands the reach of Sigmetrics. Julia Fanti did a great job in preparing the Google document that everybody used that tells you how to access the Zoom links and the Slack links. And finally, great thanks to our web chairs, Farouk Volkamutlu, Balint Tillman, and Feng Yan, who spent a huge amount of time updating the website, uploading videos. It was really a great job. And special thanks to Giuliano Casali, who has been with us every step of the way and giving us advice on how to run the conference from the Sigmetrics board perspective, and to April Moskis at ACM for helping us with uploading videos and publications and many other aspects. We're especially grateful to the U.S. National Science Foundation for its generous support in giving us the 25K travel grant. All right, now we will be having, as I mentioned, talks by the Achievement Award winner this year and Rising Star Award winner this year. So the Sigmetrics Achievement Award, by the way, the formal presentations of these awards will actually happen next year at Sigmetrics 2021. But these award winners very graciously offered to give talks on the online conference in order to generate excitement. And so many thanks to them for doing that. So the Sigmetrics Achievement Award is given annually to an individual who has made long-lasting influential contributions to the analysis and evaluation of computer communication system performance. This year's winner is Professor Leandros Tassiulas of Yale University, in recognition for his influential contributions to the foundations of network control and optimization with applications in communication and computer networks. So great congratulations to Leandros. He will be giving us a talk in just a few minutes later on in the session. The Sigmetrics Rising Star Research Award this year has been given to Professor Kuang Xu of Stanford University. The Sigmetrics Rising Star Research Award is given annually to recognize a rising star in our community who demonstrates outstanding potential for research in the field of computer and communication performance. Kuang Xu has been given this award in recognition of fundamental research on information resource allocation in large-scale stochastic systems. Congratulations, Kuang. And he will be giving us a talk in a few minutes. Finally, the award, this has been announced for the very first time, Sigmetrics Test of Time Award is an award that recognizes an influential publication selected from the pool of papers published 10 years ago in our flagship venue. In addition to novelty and technical contribution in the manuscript itself, the selection committee considers broader impact over the past decade. So this year's award goes to Tawhid Zaman of Yale University and Deborah Shah of MIT for their paper, Detecting Sources of Computer Viruses in Networks Theory and Experiment, published in Sigmetrics 2010. So this work provides a systematic study of the problem of finding virus sources in networks. The paper introduces the new notion of rumor centrality and shows that it outperforms other network centrality notions in finding rumor sources in networks which are not tree-like. Congratulations, Tawhid and Deborah, for this great award. And I actually would like to invite Tawhid to say a few words about their paper. So Tawhid.
Thank you, Edmund. And thank you to Sigmetrics for this amazing award. I gotta say, I'm kind of stunned for receiving this, and it means a lot to me to vouch for that you guys have love for this paper after so many years. For me, this paper is a very, very special paper. Academically, this is a paper that got me into networks and in particular social networks has been my driving research focus for the past, I guess, 10 years now. But personally, the paper means a lot more to me. So when I see this paper, it brings me back to very fond memories I had back in the day. So we began this work around 2009. And that year, I mean, it was a great year for me. Barack Obama was the president and Kobe Bryant won the NBA finals. And that's the year I started working for a guy named Devavrat Shah. And without his leadership, his mentorship, his wisdom, and his friendship, this paper wouldn't have happened. Devavrat, I know you're listening here, so thank you for being an amazing advisor and helping me write this amazing paper. And cheers to you, man. We did it. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Tahid. That's wonderful. All right. So let me now just discuss very briefly the rest of the agenda for the opening session. So we will now, in a few minutes, hand over to the TPC chairs who will introduce the technical program and announce the best paper awards. Then we will, Zhenhua Liu, the publications chair, will talk about the video shepherding process and announce the best video award. Finally, then Longbo Huang, who is the Vice General Chair of Sigmetrics 2021, will give us a preview of next year's conference in Beijing, China. And after these announcements, we will go to the Sigmetrics Achievement Award Lecture by Leandros Tassiulas. The title is Load Balancing with and Without Adversaries. And this will be chaired by Professor Bruce Hayek. Then we will take a short break, and then we'll have the Rising Star Award Lecture by Kuang Xu. The title is Information-centric Thinking in Stochastic Modeling and Decision Making. And this will be chaired by Zhenhua. And that's it from me. So now I invite the TPC chairs to talk about the technical program. Thank you very much.
All right. You can see my slides, right? So thank you, Edmund. So Ty and I had the honor to chair the TPC program this year, and we're going to give you an overview of the review process and the result. So we have put together a program of 55 papers selected out of 279 submissions, an acceptance rate of 20%. The program is available on the conference website. The abstracts are currently available. Hopefully the PDFs are available soon. The videos are already there. And we organized the papers into 8 sessions, in addition to the live opening sessions that we're currently attending. So the topics are listed here. They include some more traditional topics for Sigmetrics and some emerging topics like privacy and measurements. Trying to replicate the conference experience, we have created channels on Slack that that correspond to those sessions. So if you have not already done so, please register for Slack. The website is here and the invitation link is in the instructions document. We will be monitoring that those sessions, they are assigned session chairs, and we'll run it as an online conference until the end of Friday. In addition to the channels corresponding to the sessions, there are some additional channels in the Slack for announcements, for hallway casual interactions, for help desk if you need help, and for careers. Anyone can post announcements on positions in industry or academia. You can also send us the announcements by email if you like, and we'll forward them. The Student Engagement Committee have taken the initiative to stimulate questions. So please ask questions on Slack, and there will be a best question of the day selected and posted on Slack. All right. So how did we select this program? As you know, Sigmetrics is following the so-called reference model the last 3 years. There are 3 deadlines, one in summer, one in fall, one in winter. Each one has its own TPC meeting. This year they were all online. And the decisions are similar to the decisions during a journal review. So all papers that were accepted with shepherding. and that's the equivalent of a minor revision. There were also one-shot revisions that they correspond to a major revision and reject. The papers, in addition of showing up to the proceedings, were published in POMAX. The review was double-blinded, and most papers got at least 3 reviews and as high as 6 reviews on a per-need basis. There was no hard limit, there were no space constraints. The TPC was encouraged to discuss and accept worthy papers. And so the 20% acceptance rate is something that happened organically through the discussions and the review process. So the Sigmetrics community and executive committee has been continuously improving the review process itself. So as I said, the transition to German started in 2018. 2019 was a joint conference with performance, and the first time that it was a dual track conference program. This year is unfortunately going to be remembered probably as the year of COVID and the conference being happening online. But as Edmund said, that's also an opportunity for us to engage in new ways that hopefully will be useful in the future as well. And the authors will have the option to present in person. And there are more improvements coming up that the chairs of 2021 are going to describe. To put this in context, what does this evolution of the review process, what does it mean in terms of submissions and acceptance rates? So the numbers for this year, 55 papers accepted out of 279 submissions, are in line with what was the case in 2018, very similar. And 2019 had more submissions, probably because of the combination with the performance. Compared to previous years, before the reference model, 2017 and before, there were fewer submissions and slightly smaller acceptance rate, which means that Sigmetrics has been able to expand and increase the number of submissions without significantly compromising quality. And with this historical perspective, I'm going to pass it to Tai, who's going to dive in more details about this year's program.
So as Athina mentioned, the submissions were distributed over 3 deadlines, summer, fall, and winter. If we look at the number of papers accepted for the 3 deadlines, they were more or less the same. What's different is the number of papers submitted, and the winter saw a lot more papers submitted, which means that the acceptance rate for winter was lower than the rest. And we thought that this was probably because there were more rush papers in the winter. In terms of the one-shot revisions, also the number were consistent. This is a great innovation for Sigmetrics. The idea is to save exciting papers that are flawed. And this option was taken seriously by the authors and the reviewers. The authors did a thorough job of revising their paper, and most of the one-shot revisions were eventually accepted. But the reviewers also took the one-shot revisions seriously, and in fact, there were one-shot revisions that were rejected. Great. Now, there is, just before this session, I was chatting with some people in the hallway, in the hallway channel, and there was one comment that IMC papers, measurement papers, didn't seem to fit into Sigmetrics. And then there was another comment that says that a paper on operating systems she didn't think that it would fit into Sigmetrics. So there is a misperception that systems and measurement papers do not fit Sigmetrics. So we were curious about this misperception, and we looked into the numbers, and actually the acceptance rate for systems and measurement papers, 2 traditional areas, were not so different from the overall acceptance rate. We were interested in how the conference is evolving in terms of the topics of interest, and one obvious topic of interest was learning. The number of submissions there is catching up to the traditional topics of systems and measurement. And in fact, for 2021, there's going to be a special track for learning. The conference is also evolving in terms of what counts as a metric. traditionally the metrics like throughput and response time, but we are seeing an increasing number of papers that consider privacy as a metric. And in fact, privacy is the metric that brought several blockchain papers to Sigmetrics. Okay. So the systems paper, you will see that in the sessions, we have singled out the systems paper, the measurement papers, the learning, and the privacy and blockchain as dedicated sessions, in addition to the more traditional optimization, scheduling, and networking and theory. So we have many people to thank. Literally, the program committee is big. This had to be the case because although Sigmetrics is about performance, performance touches literally every area of computer science. So we needed a program committee that would match up to that diversity. So we have 80 TPC members covering all kinds of areas of computer science, different geographical areas, different seniority, balancing academia and industry. But there is a two-third overlap with the last year's program committee so that we have some consistency in the standards. Great. Other people that we need to thank, the executive committee, including the past TPC chairs, Giuliano, Adam, and Nick, who gave us a lot of guidance on what to do. Berlin gave us a whole lot of help with Hot CRP and Slack. Zhenhua was incredible in shepherding all the papers from the TPC chairs to the publication. Of course, we want to thank everybody who submitted papers and the authors who went through the very rigorous review process. At the end of the third TPC meeting, we appointed a subcommittee from the TPC to select the best papers, and this was chaired by Jia Wang. Other members on the committee were Same, Daniel, Emilio, and Govind. Okay. And the awards committee selected for best paper the Breadless Codes paper by a mixture of authors, lead author being Anku Malik from CMU, and the citation was for its contribution to the design and application of Breadless founder codes and for its analysis. This paper will be in session 8. And then there's the student paper award given to optimal data placement for heterogeneous cache, memory, and storage systems. This is from Emory University, and the citation is for proposing an offline algorithm for optimal cache placement and for sampling-based evaluation of that scheme. This paper is in session number 7. Now, aside from this absolutely marvelous pieces of work, there were 53 other excellent papers in the conference. The authors sent us some of their best work over the last year, so you should really go to the videos and the abstracts and take a look, and then talk to the authors over the Slack channels.
All right. That's it from us. Thank you, Edmund.
Thank you very much, Athina and Tai. Next, Zhenhua is going to tell us about the video shepherding process and the best video award. So please go ahead, Zhenhua.
Okay, yeah, as we all know, the conference, even though it was unfortunately canceled, but we still accomplished the normal publication process in both the POMAX and the performance evaluation review. So I want to take this opportunity to clarify this too, as I do receive some inquiry about the difference in these two. In POMAX is the new journal for our conference papers that will publish in the full length and the author have options to opt out and publish in other journals. Okay, on the other hand, the performance evaluation review is our newsletter. So all accepted papers are required to submit a 2-page extended abstract in the performance evaluation review. So the purpose is to increase the publicity of the papers and help the readers, if they only have limited time, they want to scan through all the papers, they can read the extended abstract instead of all the full papers. So I think these both are valuable and they complement each other. I hope you also feel the same. That's why the author sometimes confused by the email, because we are sending both sometime at the same time. Okay, and on the positive side, despite of the COVID-19 challenges, we have implemented the new mechanism to have the videos in both the ASM Digital Library and our own YouTube channel. In YouTube, you search for Sigmetrics 2020, you can find our YouTube channel, and you can find all the great talks there. And this makes the Sigmetrics conference more resilient and more attractive, as we already mentioned. Okay, another news for Sigmetrics is now we have the Best Video Award. And we form a committee of 8 shepherds and Stratis, Bo, Julia, Jiaming, Kuang, Nicholas, Pasi, and Ningfang. So they did additional work to shepherd the video to ensure the high quality. And after review your videos, each committee member nominated up to 1 video. So we also casted a vote, and each committee member can vote up to 2 nominated videos. And we actually receive a consensus. So the Best Video Award goes to Simple Near Optimal Scheduling for the MT1 by Ziv, Moore, and Allen from Carnegie Mellon University. Congratulations to the author. This is a great video. Okay, finally, for the acknowledgement, I want to thank Lisa from the publisher. She did a lot of work for all our authors, and so for authors, you probably receive multiple emails from her. And also Feng for our YouTube channel and the help on the online publication, our executive committee members, and our video shepherd, our TCP chairs, Athina and Tay, and of course our TPC members. And finally, our organizing committee chair, Edmund, and all the members. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Zhenhua, for all the great work on the video side. It was really a lot of work. All right, thank you. So next, Sigmetrics 2021 will take place in Beijing, China, and hopefully everything will go well and we could go with a physical conference next year. So it will be chaired by Professor Andrew Yao and Longbo Huang of Tsinghua University. And Longbo is going to talk about, give us a preview of Sigmetrics 2021. Longbo, go ahead.
Okay, let me share my screen. Okay, hopefully you can see it now. So thank you very much, Edmund, and also thank you all for attending. I'm Longbo Huang from the Institute for Interdisciplinary Information Sciences, or IIS, at Tsinghua University. It's my great pleasure to present on behalf of the organizing committee of Sigmetrics 2021 about the conference plan. Due to a limited time, I might be brief, but let me mention that the conference website is now online. So if I don't explain anything in details, please refer to the conference website. All right, so let me begin with the date and location information. So the conference is going to take place in Beijing next year during the week of June 14th to 18th, 2021. Next, I actually want to begin my introduction by showing you a short video about the city of Beijing, and I hope that it goes smoothly with the network connection. So let's see. Okay, I hope at least it played smoothly. If not, it's okay. I have the link for the video at the back of the slides so that you can watch it afterwards. But in any case, so Beijing is an amazing city. It's both historical and modern. Its story actually goes back 3,000 years. And it's a center for academia, research and development, and also IT industry in China. Many big tech companies are located in Beijing. It also has wonderful attractions, the Great Wall, the Forbidden City, Temple of Heaven, the Hutong places, and many others. And it also has great food. For example, you might have heard about the famous Peking duck. I can assure you that it's genuine in Beijing. And so Beijing is full of passion and excitement. I'm sure that you like it once you come. All right, next, let me talk about the conference organization. So there will be 2 general chairs. Professor Andrew Yao at IIIS at Tsinghua will be the chair, and I myself will be the vice general chair. And we have 3 TPC chairs. They are Anshu Gandhi from Stony Brook University, Niga Kiavash from EPFL, and Jiawang from AT&T Labs Research. And we also have the following the organizing committee. Boji at Temple University will be the publications chair. Corey George at the CMU will be the publicity chair. Zhenhua Liu at the Stony Brook will be the registration chair. Wenfei Wu at Tsinghua will be our local arrangement chair. Julia Fanti at CMU will be our student activities chair. Kuang Xu at Stanford and Patrick Loiseau at INRIA will be our workshops chairs. Mingyu Gao at Tsinghua will be the finance chair. Srinivas Chakotay from Texas A&M and Lei Ying from U Michigan will be our tutorials chair. And finally, Zhixian Fang will be the from Tsinghua will be the web chair. And so let me present the conference plan. So I think as our previous conferences, on Monday we will have the workshops. From Tuesday to Thursday, we have our 3-day main conference. And then on Friday, we have tutorials. And so here I have a couple of remarks. First, as I mentioned, the website is already online, so please check that for detailed information. And we update that in a timely fashion. And also the second remark is that we are currently planning for a normal physical conference edition. But if needed, we also consider alternative solutions, for example, virtual or remote participation. So please submit your papers to Sigmetrics 2021, and we'll make sure that it works for you. And also here's an announcement for the Sigmetrics 2020 authors of the accepted papers. And I think this is already mentioned by Edmund and also the Athina and Tay that the Sigmetrics board has agreed that the Sigmetrics 2020 authors can have the option to choose to either present their papers at Sigmetrics 2021 or present at the Performance 2020. The 2 options are mutually exclusive, and we will send out a survey to pull your plans on Slack. And also this offer is going to stand if the conferences are switching to online presentations. And we also post registration information on the conference websites once they begin to have registration. And then it's the call for papers. So Sigmetrics 2021, as in the past couple of years, we have 3 deadlines. The summer deadline is August 7th this year. The fall deadline is October 23rd. And then the spring deadline is February 5th, 2021. So there will be abstract deadlines 1 week before the submission deadlines. And this year there is a change that I think that people should notice is that as mentioned earlier, that there will be 4 checks, and each submission will be asked to select one of the 4 checks when they're submitting the papers. So including learning, measurement and applied modeling, systems and theory. And so you can also choose to select a second track if your work also belongs to that category. And this particular soft tracking information will be used to better match the reviews and submissions. And again, there are actually more information about the submission. So please refer to the call for papers on the conference website for the detailed guidelines. And let me also mention briefly about the conferences in China. We expect that Sigmetrics will be of interest to researchers from the following venues that I list some of them here. For example, SIGCOMM, NSDI, Mobile Infocom, Conex, eEnergy, ICML, and NeurIPS AAAI, and other related conferences. And also, I want to say that there are many conferences now taking place in China, and so the research environment here is actually very active and good. And we believe that you have a rewarding the experience when you come to Beijing for the conference. And so I think here are the references I put for the video and also for the conference page. And so with that, I want to thank you for listening, and we very much look forward to seeing you in Beijing next year. All right. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Longbo. And I hope that the situation will improve. Well, I know things are already okay in China, but hopefully the travel restrictions will lessen and everybody can participate in next year's Sigmetrics. And
Sure.
I love that video, by the way. So very impressive. I know that I know what you're doing in your spare time there, directing and cinematography. So it's very impressive. Thank you, Longbo. So now we're going to go to the Sigmetrics Achievement Award lecture by Leandros Tassiulas. And to introduce Leandros will be Professor Bruce Hayek. So please go ahead, Bruce.
Hello. Yes, I chaired the selection committee, and for this Achievement Award, we received several strong nominations, and several of them could have been worthy of this, but Leandros stood out, and we're very happy to present him with the Lifetime Achievement Award. Leandros is well known for his work in scheduling in a very broad sense, and it ranges from cross-layer allocation and wireless networks. His back pressure algorithm is very well known. He's also worked on scheduling multiple antennas for transmissions and joint power and beamforming papers. The methods based on Lyapunov function, quadratic Lyapunov function, are one of the rare things where it offers algorithms and also performance bounds at the same time. So without further delay, I'll introduce Leandros. He'll be giving a 30-minute talk, and then we have 5 to 10 minutes for Q&A. So Leandros, congratulations, and I look forward to your talk.
Thank you very much, Bruce. Thank you for the kind introduction, and your work has been very influential for me through the years. So it's very nice that it's you that introduced this. Hello, everybody. I was thrilled to receive the news that I received the Sigmetrics Award, and I'm really honored by the recognition from our research community. And I would like to thank the organizers for making this event happen, and Edmund in particular for looking every step of this online session we're experiencing. So I'll move to the talk. So this presentation is about the load balancing with and without adversaries, as I say here. And load balancing, of course, is an underlying theme in computer and networking with a very long history. Here, I will talk primarily for some issues that arise in scenarios with adversaries. So a lot of this presentation is contained in this paper here, but a lot of thoughts and methods are based on prior work, and I identify specifically these two that I mentioned, these earlier papers from '96 and 2006. So with this opportunity, I'll try to give a more broader view of load balancing and discuss the related works even beyond the specific focus on the talk. So the basic model that we'll see throughout the presentation is presented here. And in this model, we have a number of servers, N servers, and a number of streams of incoming job requests. So each job of stream K may be routed to a specific subset of servers that is that can be arbitrary and specific for each stream K. And the router, the dispatcher, needs to make the routing decisions. That is, which of the eligible servers each job of the stream will be directed to. The load balancing policy is the collection of these decision mechanisms for all the arriving streams. Now, the servers might receive jobs from multiple streams. So we have potential backlogs, and the backlog in each server, it's an important quantity as well to keep track through. And the objective of the load balancing policy is to optimize some metric, whether it is throughput, delay, loss, or a variety of metrics that may arise in different contexts. So we can recognize that this model can be encountered in several different settings in data centers or different networking scenarios. So we augment this model to capture possible denial of service attack scenarios by considering another collection of streams of fake jobs, the objective of which is to create a denial of service attack. So the adversary that deploys the attack, we assume that he has access to L streams of fake jobs that might correspond to different machines and botnets that may selectively have access to some machines of our network. So similarly, for each stream of fake jobs, there is a possibility to direct them to a subset of the system servers. So we have a mirror situation for the malicious traffic, as it is depicted here in the picture. And the decision or the attack policy that is deployed by the adversary is represented by the mechanism with which the fake jobs are routed to the servers. So the attack policy can similarly be represented by the collection of routing decisions of the adversary. We assume that both legitimate and malicious jobs are served at each server either in a FIFO fashion or by some scheduling discipline that is agnostic to whether a job is malicious or legitimate. We consider broad classes of routing policies, both for the legitimate and the adversary and the malicious traffic. One class is the static policies, where the stream, the jobs that come from each specific stream K are split based on predetermined fixed proportions, RKN, to each one of the eligible servers. And of course, the total arriving traffic of the stream should reach one of the eligible servers. That is what is represented by this condition. Such a policy might be realized in many ways, might be a randomized rule or some other deterministic rule that determines the proportions irrespectively of the state of the system. The other broad class of policies that we consider are dynamic policies, where the decision for the dispatching of each arriving job might be taken in a dynamic fashion at the arrival time based on information about the backlog state of the system, what is represented here. So the dynamic rules for each one of the arriving streams determine essentially the dynamic policies. Now, the objective, whether we have a static or a dynamic load balancing, is for the adversary to disrupt the service via a proper selection of the attack policy, while for the legitimate traffic is to ensure that despite the disruption attempts from the adversary, service is provided and the goal is accomplished. So we need to address this competition between the two sides. Now, I'll step back now and look first on the load balancing system without the adversaries to summarize a few important results in the past. And here is a general view of work that has been done on load balancing systems of the type we consider since the early 70s. So these systems have been considered with the objective initially to minimize the average delay via dynamic state-dependent control. So Markov decision process formulations had been considered, and the optimal dynamic allocation policy that minimizes the delay was characterized, but had usually the form of switching curves partitioning the state space of the system. When the system is symmetric, it has been identified that the well-known join the shortest queue policy is optimal, sorry, not optional. It's autocorrect here, problem. And the delay minimizing dynamic policy has been difficult to characterize in more complex topologies. So most of these results about delay optimality with switching curves types of control rules were for fairly simple systems as far as the topology is concerned or size. And another direction that has been pursued quite a bit was the objective of optimizing the system performance under static routing policies. So the general approach here was that the cost associated with each server N was a function of the aggregate traffic received by the server. And the objective was to minimize the total cost over all servers by a proper choice of the static routing policies. And again, a lot of work has been done on identifying optimal policies in different settings and assumptions about what information is available about the current cost or the current allocation of the load and so on. So in this approach, people were managing to optimize the network, but of course they were not taking advantage of the additional information of dynamic state information that if could have been taken properly into consideration, we might have even better performance than what is achievable by static policies. So a related work that we have been done early on, and it's reported in this 96 paper, somehow try to compromise these objectives of having optimal performance with optimal delay performance, let's say, with full state information and the objective of addressing large realistic systems. So in this work, we consider the following point of view. For certain, we considered first static routings, and we considered for specific system workload characterized by the traffic generation rates of the different streams, whether they are feasible in the sense that there is some static routing policy that ensures proper operation of the system and the finite delays. So this set of sustainable workloads represented by lambda is the legitimate operational region of the network. So a question we addressed is whether we can ensure such legitimate operation using dynamic policies and without having information about the statistics in the system or the network structure. So it turned out that a simple policy, the well-known join the shortest queue policy, if it is adopted for each stream, it's good enough for ensuring proper stable operation in the general system. And in this case, the routing decision for each stream can be taken based on the backlog information of the eligible servers for the stream only. Furthermore, the necessary and sufficient conditions for the sustainability of workload were characterized. And they have the following simple form, that is, for any subset of the servers, it is enough if the aggregate capacity of the servers in the subset exceeds the traffic load of the streams that may only be routed within the servers of the set S. So these results are useful for the adversarial scenario that we'll see later. But before that, maybe I should mention the more general setting where this result hold and was shown in the previous paper. So it has been shown there that the JSQ policy, even in multi-hop networks, it is good enough for providing overall system stability and sustainable operation if it is enhanced by an additional feature of having each server performing flow control based on the back pressure rule that says that the server is active and provides service only if its backlog length is less than at least one of the eligible downstream servers. Otherwise, the server should idle. So the combination of this flow control rule with JSQ is adequate to provide the proper operation for these larger topologies. So JSQ policy appeared to be fairly powerful. For instance, in addition, it has been shown in that work that the JSQ provides sustainable operation even if the state information that is available for the dispatching of a job is delayed in a fairly arbitrary fashion, as it is indicated by the rule here. So that much about the JSQ in this general context. No, there is more actually, but this is in a different context, still relevant for the adversarial setting. And this other context is what is happening if the network operates in overload. Overload in the sense that the workload is not sustainable, or in other words, there is one or more subset of servers S for which the offered traffic to the subset exceeds the server, the subset capacity. And when I say offer traffic here, I mean offer traffic under any routing policy. So this is the traffic that is inevitably can only be routed to the servers of the set S. So if the workload of the network is in that regime, of course, sustainability is not possible, but still JSQ routing has a very good performance in the sense that it ensures that the growth rate of the backlogs of the different servers is max-min optimal over any routing policy, which is the best that we can hope for in these overload situations. And this was a result that was included in this paper. Furthermore, a characterization of these growth rates was made in that work, and it has been shown that if we identify the set of servers for which the amount by which the offer traffic exceeds the service capacity divided by the size of the set is maximum, then it can be shown that the growth rate of the servers of the set S will be equal to R under the JSQ policy and being equal to this max-min optimal vector. I should note here that networks in overload and in heavy traffic in general has been studied considerably the last several years until recently, and here are some representative works that show either approximate optimality of JSQ even in terms of workload optimization, as well as optimality with respect to higher order moments of the queue length process. So with the background of these results, let's go back to the adversarial setting that we saw earlier, and would like to address both the attack and the defense questions. Similarly to the routing policies that we described earlier for a legitimate workload, for the attacker, we may have either static attacks or dynamic attacks. So given a specific static attack for the attacker specified by the proportions QLN with which the malicious traffic is spread to the different servers under attack, a routing R for the legitimate traffic is feasible if this condition holds, like if we manage that eventually each server is not overloaded. Now we say that a workload is sustainable under some attack queue if there is a routing that is feasible under queue. So with this point of view, we may consider the region lambda sub Q to be the set of sustainable workloads under Q, that is the collection of all workloads for which there is a feasible routing when the attacker chooses the attack based on the vector Q. And we may consider the intersection of all the sustainable workloads over all possible attacks. And let's say that this intersection is the region lambda. Now, let's see what the properties of the workloads in lambda, what are the properties of the workloads in lambda. Note that for each workload in lambda, it is possible to find a routing scheme for which the system is sustainable no matter what the attack queue is. But of course, we may need to wisely select the routing of the workload given the attack. So in this sense, lambda can be called the region of sustainable workloads under the malicious attacker specified by the vector u1 through ul, where note that this vector represents the intensities of the attack war stream, the attack traffic streams. And let's say it's a basic restriction to whatever eventual attack queue we may end up deploying. Now, if we consider static routings, it is understandable that even if we have a sustainable workload, we need to select wisely the routing scheme in order to mitigate the specific attack queue that is chosen by the adversary. Now, it turns out, and that's not difficult to see actually based on the previous results, that if the adversary deploys static attacks, then JSQ routing from the side of the legitimate workload is adequate to provide sustainable operation given that Q belongs to lambda. Here is a simple example to illustrate the previous notions. So assume that we have a service system as it is indicated here in the figure, that is 3 legitimate traffic streams with the same density A, 4 servers with nominal capacity 1, and 2 attack streams with intensity B each. And the dashed lines indicate the eligible servers to which its traffic can be routed. We can easily see that in this setting, if there is no adversary, the region of sustainable workloads is this, that is for any A less than 4/3, the system is sustainable. And if the adversary has malicious traffic with intensity D, the sustainable workload region lambda is reduced to what is depicted here. So depending on the intensity of the attack, A is bounded by one of those 2 terms. Okay. Of course, the attacker need not deploy static attacks, and the objective of the attacker is to bring down the system no matter what. So we may have dynamic policies on the side of the adversary, and a dynamic policy is allowed to make routing decisions based on current backlog information, and actually will allow the attacker to be able to decide the routing information based on the different backlogs of legitimate and malicious traffic. So note that although that the servers cannot differentiate legitimate and malicious traffic, the attacker might be able to. And anyway, an attack policy that is based on the differentiated backlogs can only be more effective than one that doesn't. So if we design the system robust with respect to these policies, that can only help us. So we consider stationary dynamic attack policies where the routing decision of the fake jobs is based on some arbitrary function of this type. And one of the basic results that we found out is that if the legitimate workload is sustainable, then JSQ routing of the legitimate traffic can mitigate any stationary dynamic attack of the adversary and ensure stable operation as well as bounded delay for the legitimate traffic. The attacker, on the other hand, would like to maximize its effectiveness as well. So an interesting point of view to see is to see if the workload is not sustainable, whether the attacker, the adversary U, can always achieve its goal and bring down the system. So in order to address this question, we need to identify for each specific attack policy, what is the region of legitimate workloads for which the system is disrupted. So we considered a variety of attack policies, and we found out by extensive numerical study actually that a simple dynamic attack policy that ensures that the system is brought down and is disrupted as long as this is possible is if each one of the malicious traffic sources is routed based on the rule that is specified here in the formula, that is, each job is routed to the eligible server in DL for which the legitimate traffic load is maximum. Interestingly, actually, there is a paper in this conference by Fu and Modiano that construct a provably optimal attack policy. It's an interesting related result. Now, of course, the attacker can do whatever they want. So they don't need to be employ a stationary policy, that is the rule that we have here, or the rule that the attacker may employ can be any, even time changing, right? And it turns out that non-stationary attacks can be more effective if they are properly designed. Oops. That is, they may disrupt the operation and destabilize the system, even in cases where no stationary attack policy can achieve that goal. Actually, in the paper, we have a systematic construction of this kind of non-stationary attack policies, but here I will highlight the way they work by an example as it is outlined here. So consider the following scenario, that is a single legitimate workload and a single attack workload served K servers. We see, of course, that if there is no adversary, any workload is sustainable as long as it is less than the total server capacity. Also, we can easily see that if we have a stationary adversary, the necessary and sufficient condition for a workload to be stable or to be sustainable is that A is less than K minus B. Now, if we allow the, okay, so, or if we see this relationship from the other point of view, the adversary needs power B, which should be greater than K minus A in order to disrupt the operation. Now it can be shown that with a non-stationary approach, an adversary with attack power B that is greater than 1 can disrupt the operation of the system as well. And let me describe how that the policy will work. So in this non-stationary attack, where any b greater than 1 will be adequate to disrupt the operation of the system, so essentially cause unbounded delays, the attacker will direct all the attack traffic to the same server, and will do that in a cyclic fashion from server to server. Now, the time intervals of the attack to each server in each cycle should be properly chosen. And furthermore, the length of the different cycles should be increased in a systematic fashion as well in order to achieve this disruption. So this is better described by a picture that is drawn here for a system with 3 servers. And we see how the attack policy will operate. So initially, all the attack traffic will be directed to server 1 that will build backlog for as long as we keep attacking the server. Then at some point, we'll direct all the traffic to server 2. And at some point, server 1 and server 2 will have the same backlog. At that time, we switch the attack to server 3. So at some point, all 3 servers will have the same backlog. At this time, we switch back to server 1 and we repeat the process for a period of time that is greater than the previous one by a multiplicative factor greater than 1. Let's say we may double the cycle time in every period. That is good enough. So with this attack, we observe that the backlog evolution, we follow the curves we have here. And for each cycle, we observe that we have a period of time that all 3 servers are backlogged with a backlog that described in this triangle. And we can make this triangle as large as we wish by increasing the cycle length, while we know that at each cycle, the proportion of time duration of this triangle remains the same. Note though that as the triangle increases, the delay of the traffic, either legitimate or attack traffic, increases as well. So by increasing the cycle, we may increase the average delay over the whole triangle as much as we wish, and we may disrupt the operation of the system. So I hope I gave you a flavor of the operation of the policy, and I'll conclude now. And a few observations based on this work. First, we note that we would like to note that there are several interesting open problems in the adversarial setting. For instance, characterization of metrics which are relevant to adversarial attacks is an important question, and more specifically metrics that are relevant and to specific applications, that is applications for which the application is sensitive for. And this is an interesting direction for further research, and the approach presented here might be of interest. A more general observation that comes out of the presentation, I hope, that is that as the technology evolves and the focus of attention of the performance community shifts, some basic load balancing principles continue to underlie system behavior and be important. Actually, I noticed in the title of the best paper award in this conference that load balancing was included as well. I don't know, maybe it's not related at all to what is presented here, but it's load balancing in general. And a last general statement that I hope reflects from what is presented is that basic research and addressing the important questions is a long-term investment in research. And with this, I'll finish.
Thank you, Leandros. We have time for a couple of questions. There's one written from Abhishek. You can look in the chat box, Leandros. He asked, do these results generalize when a job has to be sent to multiple servers for processing?
Yeah, this load balancing model that is presented is very simple in the sense that each job engages just one server. I understand that a lot of scenario may arise, like what is mentioned by Abhishek, that is a job might need to engage several servers. The questions are certainly applicable in that setting. I can say that the earlier results about the load balancing, the join the shortest queue policy generalized to these settings. Actually, if a job engages several servers, other scheduling disciplines might need to be employed as well that are more reminiscent of max wait type of scheduling, since its server cannot be scheduled independently. So the maximum sustainability behavior without adversary, it's generalized. Now, if there are adversaries, I think it's an interesting open question for somebody to look at.
Okay, there's a question from Zhenhua Louis. For sustainable region under static attack, when B goes to 0, will the region go back to the original one without the attack?
Yeah, I mean, if B goes to 0, I mean, if there is no attack, we'll enjoy the same performance, yeah. And note that even even if we allow non-stationary attacks, in order to have the effect I described, we need the attacker intensity to be high enough so that the attacker can bring down at least one server.
Okay, I have one question. So there's a Blackwell's approachability theorem, which is well known in game theory. And I'm wondering in an overload situation, if you could apply that to look at throughput regions that you could achieve in the overload situation.
The overload without adversaries?
With adversaries.
Well, that's possible. We haven't looked into it. So such a theorem might be useful to characterize the regions of the effective regions, both from the point of view of the legitimate traffic and the adversary. So that might be an interesting thing to look at.
Okay, thank you, Leandros. I think that's all the time we have. Thank you for a wonderful talk, and we'll move on to the next.
Thank you and everybody for attending.
Thank you, Bruce, and thank you, Leandros, for a fascinating talk. What we're going to do now is to take a few-minute break, let's say a 3-minute break, and then we will continue with the Rising Star talk by Huang, and which will be chaired by Zhenhua. So let's take a 3-minute break. Thank you. Okay, we are back after the break. Before we go to the next talk, I just wanted to mention to everyone that if you have a question for the speakers in this live session, it may be that we won't have time for all the questions in the live session. So, and also if you think of questions down the road later, you can always go to the Slack channel. There's a Slack channel for the live session. So you can always ask questions there, and this will be monitored and will be moderated. So the speakers will get back to you on the Slack session if somehow we don't have time for that here. All right, so let's now go to the Rising Star lecture by Kuang Xu, and the session will be chaired by Zhenhua. So please go ahead.
Hello, I'm Jinwoo Shin from KAIST Korea. I'm very excited to introduce Professor Kuang Xu for the winner of Sigmetrics Rising Star Award this year. Kuang received a PhD degree in EECS MIT in 2014 and now an associate professor at Stanford University. So Kuang's research interests are on understanding fundamental properties and design principles of large-scale stochastic systems using tools from applied probability theory and optimization with applications in queuing networks, healthcare, privacy, and machine learning. So he received first place in the Informs George E. Nicholson Student Paper Competition in 2011 and the Best Paper Award and Sigmetrics 2013. So this Rising Star Award is to recognize his fundamental contribution to information and resource allocation in large-scale stochastic systems. Congratulations, Kuang, and we will wait for your great talks. So you have 30 minutes for your talk, and please welcome Kuang.
Thank you, Jinwoo. Thanks everyone for this opportunity. Obviously, extremely excited. Sigmetrics is a community very dear to me. Pretty much joined the community since day one in grad school. So very, very honored to be given this recognition. So let me share the screen. All right. So the theme today is going to be about this idea of information-centric thinking, which has been on my mind for a while. So I think I would just kind of have a stab at that. I will definitely say first a few thanks. Thanks for the Sigmetrics community. And I want to say some special thanks to my PhD advisor, Leandros Tassiulas from MIT, and also Bruce, actually, who's here. And Bruce was my undergraduate advisor. So without those two, I probably wouldn't be on this path today. And of course, this wouldn't be possible without the collaborators. So I thank them all, as well as my students. All right, so here's the plan for today. I thought I will probably kind of make some design choices in the sense that I will first introduce an idea of this shift from resource allocation to information. And this idea, so-called information lifecycle, that really helped me organize some thoughts in this area. And now there's a tremendous amount of work done in all of these areas. So today, I will focus on some research vignettes from my own work. Now, that being said, of course, I would say most of the material here, except for the theorems, are purely personal reflections, and there's so far no claim as to how novel they are, and woefully missing nearly all the references. But hopefully, that will give a sense of this idea that I'm talking about. I apologize for that in advance, and I'll give references for the paper, which then hopefully will have all the correct references there. Now, I will conclude the talk by having some reflections on whether this idea of information-centric thinking is all worth it, or is it just an abstract construct? So hopefully that's not the case. So diving right in. Now, for the purpose of this talk, slightly some notation. So when I say information, I think suffice to think about information as sort of partial knowledge of some useful input or state of the system. And for this community, thinking information in terms of knowledge about the queue length, or knowledge about arrival rates, or possibly about the future. For example, maybe you can predict future arrivals to the system or future demand patterns. On the other end of the equation, there's so-called resource allocation. And here I'm specifically thinking about some problems where we're assigning finite resources to attain certain system-wide objective. And I'm sure for this community, it's very familiar. In data centers or call centers, we're assigning server resources to processing jobs. In routing, we can think about assigning link capacity to different routes or different streams of transmissions. And finally, in crowdsourcing, we can imagine assigning people and human capital to solving certain challenging tasks or labeling certain images. Okay, and since we're going to cover quite a few different models, I will just stay at this level of generality and won't go too deep into the details. All right, so I started thinking about this problem probably a couple of years ago. Of course, it wasn't just sitting there thinking from scratch, rather just looking at some papers I read, some papers I wrote, and thinking about where this kind of area is going. And I thought, if you think about very, very long time ago, let's say pre-computer ages. So I would argue at the time, resource allocation was quite resource driven. What I mean by that is system design often centered at the time around physical resources. Do you own the mine? Do you own the land, energy, manufacturing plants, and so on and so forth? Now, whoever controls the physical resource in these situations control more of the problem in general. Skills and information were relevant, but not yet really play a central role at the time. So fast forward a bit, after computer got invented, I would say the stretch from 1950 to early 2000, of course, very rough time, is a shift towards what I call more information-driven decision-making. Now, over this period, information starts to serve as a means to an end for better decision-making. So we can look at CRM, which is customer relation management, thinking about customers and then designing products for them. Fast fashions like Zara, they will actually look at the market and design different fashion for it. And for our community, dynamic scheduling. Of course, I think at this point, people think of dynamic scheduling as really making decisions, not statically, but based on the information system at the time. But all in all, suffice to say, with information technology, resource allocation is increasingly being informed by the information available. And we've seen a lot of benefits to that approach. Good. So what next? Going forward from 2020, I will posit potentially, are we going to move into a so-called information-centric time? So information data in this era can potentially become the end goal in and of itself. Now, I won't have to convince you, but if you think about Google, arguably it is a company that centers around information, sells information, and that's the entire business. But the question also gets much more interesting when we think about the role inversion in some less obvious questions. For instance, if you look at hardware companies that apparently is allocating physical resources, such as Apple or Tesla, are they really hardware companies that just use information, like the previous slide? Or really, they're an information company building hardware and cars and phones all around. So I will stop right here at this kind of a high-level musing and think, if that's indeed where the world was going, how is this information centrality reflected more specifically in our research and in our understanding, design of resource allocation systems? How to articulate it, and once we articulate it, can we see some interesting opportunities? Okay, so of course there's so many ways to phrase such a vague problem, so I thought I would take a stab at it. And when I thought about the problem, I think the first thing that came to mind was, if we were to build design systems around information, we should probably make information a bit more tangible. Such a vague term that evokes totally different ideas in everybody. So here's one proposal, which is, can we understand how to design resource allocation systems to facilitate the generation, utilization, and protection of information? Namely, think of information as a living creature that was born, that lives, and eventually that dies. Okay, so what does each life stage mean? So in generation, here we're thinking about how to best generate information with finite resources. And in the research vignette I'm going to discuss in a bit, I'll be discussing about resource-constrained machine learning, crowdsourcing, as well as experimental design. So here's using resources to generate the maximum amount of information possible. And on the utilization side, the question will be, what is the fundamental utility and value of information to resource allocation? And here we'll be looking at some problem related to value information in stochastic processing networks, as well as in scheduling. And then finally, probably the somewhat not so obvious one is protection. So what does it mean for information to die in the resource allocation context? And here I would say, maybe can we think about how to prevent unwanted outflow of information while a decision maker is engaged in allocating resources? And this will lead us to a problem related to privacy-aware routing, as well as active learning. Okay. So in the next few slides, I will essentially briefly overview some specific models that we've looked at in each of the three areas, and at the end, hopefully tie them together and give a summary comment. Okay, to start utilization, I actually chose to start from the middle of the life cycle because this is the first project I encountered myself as a graduate student towards the end of my PhD. And before I start on the specific model, let me just flash this very common system diagram. And suffice to say, when I think about these systems, I'm essentially thinking about a picture of such a kind where I would then move the emphasis of information from one part of the system to another. So here we're looking at a big box in the middle, says resource allocation problem. And for all the problem we consider, the problem will essentially have some kind of input, oftentimes stochastic, like arrivals, and have some output, maybe a job is processed or some information spit out. And the problem often has a decision maker who obtains information about the system through the system state or observing some kind of input information, makes a decision, applies an action, and the whole thing repeats forever. Okay? So now for this first part, we'll be looking at information on the following branch. That is, what is the utility of information about the input? Now, the specific model we're looking at is, in fact, a very classic queuing model. So here is a queuing model about admission control with future information. We're looking at a very simple single queue with a single server. Jobs arrive to the system stochastically. Now, unfortunately, the system is under overload, which means we cannot serve everyone. So some admission decision must be made upon arrival. And as a result, we know that a fraction of jobs must be diverted to another server, possibly, and due to the service constraints. Now, the goal is up to this diversion constraint, I want to be able to minimize the waiting time and or queue length across all the jobs that I do admit. An application of such basic model are actually pretty wide. For instance, in internet congestion control, this type of model shows up. And in healthcare, in many states, actually, hospitals do have to go on diversion whenever their providers are overloaded. And so this model shows up as well. So all this is quite classical. And the new twist here is about future information. So we're going to assume at this point that the decision maker not only knows the state of the system at the time, but can peek into the future and learn the future arrival times of jobs and server speed up to some finite look-ahead window. Okay. So here's what we discovered in this line of work. So if we call L the look-ahead window length, measuring essentially the amount of information available, and consider the heavy traffic regime where total arrival rate matches total service rate plus diversion, here's what we know. So there exists two constants, A and B, that the following happens. First, if my information window, the look-ahead window, is sufficiently long, and specifically longer than A times log 1 over 1 minus lambda, then the steady state delay or steady state queue length is under order 1. In fact, it's a constant order in the heavy traffic limit as lambda goes to 1. So if I have a lot of information, great things happen. But on the contrary, conversely, if L is just shorter than some other constant B times the same scaling factor, then not only is my queue length not a constant in heavy traffic, in fact, always blows up at roughly the same rate up to a constant factor in heavy traffic. So to summarize this pictorially, this is what we see. On the x-axis, I'm plotting the amount of information available about the future. And on the y-axis, the optimal queue length a optimal policy can achieve. There's sort of a sharp-ish phase transition around this number in the middle. So above the information threshold, I see very, very small delay. And below that, even the best optimal policy will have to suffer a fairly long delay on the order of having no information at all. and such drastic change in performance is not only observed in theory, but in simulation as well. So here I'm showing you a very simple trace where the blue line is the do nothing policy, where the system is under overload and blows up. The black line is the optimal online threshold policy. And you see the Q length keep bouncing up and down pretty high. And whereas at the very bottom, the red line is when you apply certain kind of future informed scheduling policy. And here you can see the gap between the online and the future information policy is actually quite a bit. Now, later we did some follow-up work with the Carrie Chen of Columbia University, and we looked at applying this method actually in sort of in practice in the setting of emergency room mission. And here, because it's a practical situation, you obviously have general arrival service patterns, and the prediction cannot be 100% accurate. But even then, it seems to be that this insight carries over, and you will see somewhere around 10 to 7% improvement over the best state of our policy, even under prediction error. Okay, so far we've looked at one vignette where the utility of future information does have a very significant impact on system performance. So the last part of this section, I will briefly mention the more recent work. And this time we're gonna look at the measurement on system state. How much information do I get from the system state, and how does that impact performance? So this is based on the paper from last year's Sigmetrics called Stochastic Processing Under Imperfect Information. And here we're quite inspired by a line of literature in control theory, where we're looking at a decision maker who is trying to control a stochastic network from afar. So for concreteness, we might imagine the decision maker being some algorithm sitting far away, and the Kuang networks being a data center somewhere in the desert. Now, due to the communication constraint, we would assume that there is some information impedance, some information corruption between the state of the queues and the decision maker. And this model is intended to capture communication constraints when managing a large-scale data center or in human-in-the-loop system where the states are often not easy to observe. And the question we want to answer is, what fraction of capacity region do we lose as a function of information and memory available in the system? And the key findings are the following, which is, for one, we're able to characterize the capacity loss under essentially very general information structures as captured by some sense of Shannon channel, and as well as under a combination of different memory constraints on the encoder of the channel and the decoder. And without going too much into details, suffice to say, another finding is that, indeed, to achieve all these optimal capacity regions, and it turns out a generalization of the famous Maxwell policy, and so fitting that Leandros gave a talk right before. And in fact, this family policy, what we call episodic Maxwell, is actually sufficient to achieve the optimal capacity under limited information or limited memory. So that wraps up the kind of portion about utility. So just to recap, we were thinking about if information can be measured, can we put a price tag on how much information is valuable to me as a decision maker in a resource allocation problem? So now I'm going to flip the table and look at the case where information now becomes the goal of resource allocation to begin with. And here we're looking at the same picture, except for now the packet of information goes to the output. So the model I'm going to discuss next, its whole objective existence is to spit out information. And here is a model we looked at back in 2018 with the Laurent Massoulier, so-called information processing system. So the question here we want to understand is, what is really the fundamental processing power of a fixed number of servers as far as churning out information is concerned? Here we're looking at a system where the system is getting a stream of unlabeled jobs. And for concreteness, we can think about jobs being pictures. And we employ a set of servers, either computers running algorithms or humans, to perform noisy inspections on these jobs. The resource constraint in this problem is captured by the fact that we have finite server capacity, and as well as the fact that each inspection is not free. Each inspection will occupy the server for some amount of time. Now, the application for this kind of model, we can think about machine learning in the case where your processing power is hosted on a fixed number of machines, crowdsourcing, where your servers are human agents, and as well as design experiments. So your servers could be, in this case, experiments that do have a limited capacity as far as how many experiments you can perform per day. Now, the central question is, can we understand what is the maximum information processing capacity for a fixed amount of resources, and how to extract it algorithmically using a scheduling policy? Okay. And the picture on the right is supposed to illustrate one simple example. A cat picture shows up in the system. Then we route this picture to different servers in the system, and each time the server thinks for a while, labels some kind of noisy signal on the picture, return it back, and the whole process continues until at the end, for some reason, we feel we have enough information and we spit out the job and say the label is cat. Right. So the main results in this system is as follows. And our goal is to understand how do we maximize information output. And here's actually captured in a very simple way, namely flow rate. How many jobs can we label per second, subject to a certain error probability constraint? And the main result says there exists a prior oblivious scheduling policy, namely, I don't need to know what fraction cat pictures there are, and such that in the limit where my accuracy is very, very high, then the amount of jobs I can process under this particular policy will essentially converge to the maximum rate at which any Oracle policy can do it. And that's essentially the type of guarantee we have. And here, the little o of 1 can be written more explicitly as a function of the accuracy. Now, the results aside, I want to just highlight a key idea here and make a connection to why this could be interesting for resource allocation, which is the key to enable such result is to view the system state, essentially a vector of some kind of cumulative log likelihood ratios between different labels, as what I call an information workload. Now, once this can be established, then we can essentially bring to bear techniques quite familiar to this community, such as fluid models, and to attack this workload process and derive optimal flow rate results. Now here, the key is to understand arrivals, quote unquote, in the system as essentially uncertainties to be eliminated via processing. And I think this is a general theme when we think about information processing. There's actually a very, very strong analog to processing systems like data centers and queuing systems, where no longer we have a queue of just static jobs, but rather these are information to be learned or uncertainties to be quenched. Okay, so moving to the last part, this is about protection. So again, the same picture, but now we're actually assuming that as someone is engaged in allocating resources, what if there's an adversary, bad actor, or maybe a very powerful company who's monitoring the actions you're taking in allocating resources? And the motivation here is actions are often very hard to hide. In fact, sometimes when we buy items on Amazon, our actions are exactly reported to Amazon through our browsing or purchase. Now, at the high level, the question here was, how can an adversary learn about some secretive input of this resource allocation problem? And if so, can we design allocation policies to prevent such adversarial learning in an efficient manner? So to make matter concrete, we'll look at a very specific case of routing. And by routing, I mean a very simple classic routing. So we have a network. And here we will be sending a parcel from point 0 to some destination, D. The route we're going to plan out deterministically and execute it deterministically. Sorry, we'll execute deterministically, but plan out with certain randomness possibly. The route must include a destination to deliver the parcel, but does not necessarily have to end exactly at a destination. And we'll assume that there's some adversary that observes the network traffic or road traffic and wants to predict the intended recipient from this observed route. So in this case, on the picture, we have a route from 0, E, D, and C. And here D is in fact the true recipient. The resource constraint as captured by the upper bound on delay, namely I don't want to deliver the package for too long. And the delay actually also translates into network congestion because the more edges we traverse, the more congestion we cause. So that helps us arrive at a private routing formulation, which is how can one minimize the prediction probability subject to a delay constraint? And a similar framework can be applied also to a sequential learning framework. Now for this particular model, we were able to derive the following bound, which says that essentially there is a very tight trade-off between information leakage and the delay we have to suffer in the following sense. If we fix some delay budget W, then an upper bound says there exists a routing strategy under which the prediction probability for the adversary is limited at 2 over W minus D, where D is certain diameter of the graph. And the lower bound says essentially this is the best possible in that any routing strategy that achieves delay W must suffer a prediction risk of 1 over 2W. And together, this suggests that indeed there's an information and resource efficiency trade-off in that the amount of information leakage as measured by prediction probability is always on the order of 1 over resource budget in the minimax sense. All right, so those are a very quick flash of some of the research vignettes in each of these 3 areas. And I want to just close by sharing some closing thoughts on these things. I guess the first question that I asked myself, and probably many of you will have this question, which is such an information-centric framing at all necessary? Don't we have 3 different areas, such as machine learning, queuing systems and performance, and privacy, all attacking these problems? So why don't we address them in separate frameworks or even in separate conferences and communities? Now, I guess it's probably not surprising that I think that such a framing is indeed beneficial. And I would like to share with you some reasoning behind that thought. So for one, I think it's pretty obvious that from the application perspective, modern applications don't just choose to be in one of the 3 information life cycles, and oftentimes attacks both or 2 or all 3 of the life cycles. So here are 2 examples. If you think about the recent advance in privacy-aware machine learning or federated learning, it's really a problem about extracting information about the data set, at the same time protecting some sense of privacy, either individual privacy or some other notion of privacy. And therefore here, we certainly confront a situation where we're trying to generate information at the maximum rate, and while not generate information in certain other dimension effectively. And the second example would be data center scheduling that relies on machine learning algorithms for estimating or predicting crucial variables. Oftentimes, to actually perform load balancing in large systems, it's impossible to directly obtain the state information. And nowadays, a lot of algorithms actually rely on ML to kind of guess the queue length or guess the server speed. And here we're facing with design a system that has generation and utilization all in one box. And so from the application perspective, I would say that it might be very beneficial to keep all these elements in mind at the same time when designing the system. Now, from the more mathematical or methodological perspective, we've already seen sharing methodologies across these 3 areas can often lead to quite interesting advances. And as I mentioned before, applying ideas from queuing theory, such as the max-way policy or the idea of information workload, can actually help us in designing ML systems with resource constraints. And it's also not surprising that information theoretic tools are quite fundamental to all 3 areas, such as Fano's inequality, which is very useful in understanding private allocation policies. And lastly, in some recent work, we've been looking at this program using mean field modeling, not quite to tackle performance evaluation, but to tackle experimental design under interference. And that's another area, a tool that we're very familiar with here can have an impact in an area that hasn't quite seen the same kind of methodology. And finally, reason 3 is probably the most exciting personally to me, but I have the least to talk about, which is all said and good, but could there be even newer discoveries that would have not been possible had we not combined these 3 life cycles in one picture? I don't have a concrete theorem or result to state, but I would say there have been some partial glimpses. So for instance, if we look at learning and if we look at utilization and protection in one framework, we quickly see there is some fundamental trade-off between how private the system is and how essentially greedily or adaptively a allocation policy exploits the information. We haven't quite written those down in words, but that certainly seems a very exciting area to explore, which is sort of this fundamental trade-off between privacy and the utility of the information. And another area is even more vague, but there's been some indication that the amount of information needed to perform a task has to do with the stochastic nature of the input of this task. Now, I wonder if the reverse is true. Can we say information generation, the kind of nature of the resource needed has to do with the underlying stochastic nature of the probability distribution that we're trying to learn? And these questions I always think are extremely exciting. And obviously there's much, much more to explore. And with that, I will conclude my talk. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Kuang. So now this is a Q&A session, and so first question is by Ziv. So can you comment in a little more detail how you use information theoretic tools? It is mainly used in lower bounds. That's the question.
And G, that's a great question. And the short answer is absolutely yes. And there are two ways in which information theory tool and theoretic tools are being used most of my work. One is Fanel's inequality, understanding sort of adaptive sampling lower bounds. And these ideas are actually not so new. They're often used in learning theory, but applying them in the resource allocation context seems quite interesting. And another area is quite similar to Fanel's inequality, which is these lower bounds in estimation. Static estimation, and that's used to derive these resource constraints in information processing, but indeed.
Okay, so second question is by how? So why not user-centric instead of information-centric? So because the value of information should be measured by the users of information, right?
That's a fantastic question. I actually have no answer to that. I guess the goal for calling information-centric is really just to focus on one element of the system design, which is information. Now, if the focuses have a better user experience, I absolutely agree that at the end of the day, a lot of stuff we do is for the users. So I think that's a fantastic point.
Okay, so I have one question. So it may be a stupid question, but have you thought, or can you give any random comments on the reinforcement learning perspective of your question, your research, or your results?
I think in RL, yeah, I'm definitely not an expert in reinforcement learning, and I have thought a bit about that, but at the moment, I'm not quite sure where it fits in this framework. Possibly, I would say it's in understanding the value of information, except for the value is adaptive in that you have to go out there and get the information yourself. And that's probably where I would put the RL perspective, but I don't have anything specific to say on that front yet.
Maybe I will choose the last question. Okay, so this is question by more Hakor Butter. So can you explain the motivation for your first model? So why does server speed depending on the rate of arrival? So specifically, you set the server rate to be 1 minus p. So can you explain the motivation behind the model?
Oh, fantastic. That's a great question. So to Moore's question, the specific server speed is just a scaling convenience, meaning we just scale the whole thing down to 1. And whenever the server speed is less than the total arrival, then after scaling, the server speed will be some number less than 1, and we call that 1 minus p. And it's not a fundamental number by any means. It's just after scaling that's the case.
Thank Kuang for your great talk.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Zhenhua, and thank you for your talk, Kuang. So that basically wraps it up for the live session, the agenda of the live session. So as I mentioned at the beginning of the session, we really encourage everyone to participate as much as you can over the next couple of days until the end of Friday. Watch the videos that you're interested in, participate in the Slack channels for the papers as well as the hallway discussions and career discussions. And if you have questions that we didn't have time to answer during the live session, you can actually pose those questions in the Slack channel for the live session. In fact, I think what we'll do is to transfer those questions over to any questions left over for the live session over to the Slack channel, and the speakers can go to the Slack channels and address the questions there. So I'd like to thank all of the panelists today who talked during the live session, the chairs, as well, of course, as the speakers, Leandros and Kuang. Thank you so much for spending time to join everybody on the live session. And so we hope that the online conference will go forward and be very exciting and participatory. And we'll see you on the Slack channels. And I understand it will be asynchronous because everybody's in a different time zone, but we will have a lot of interaction there. Before I go, are there any quick announcements by anybody on the panel for the online conference? Anything I forget to mention? Okay, so thank you very much. I know it's getting pretty late in some parts of the world, so really appreciate your hanging in there and joining us. Please enjoy the conference. Thank you so much. Thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.